Good morning, Columba, and welcome to day one of Inquiry 5. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you on Zoom later today. But before we check in, I wanted to get you started with a little activity to kick off our study of water this inquiry. So I'm sitting here in my garden, and I have 1 liter about of dirty water. And the reason it's dirty is because I added dirt to it. And I did that because I wanted you to be able to see it throughout this activity. It's sort of like adding food coloring, except it's dirt. So I have my 1 liter of water here, and this liter represents all of the water on our planet. That includes water that is in the oceans, water that's underground, water that's in the atmosphere, water in lakes, water in a swimming pool. And this liter is going to help us understand where we find water on Earth. So if this liter of water represents all the water on planet Earth, I am going to be measuring out different amounts of it and putting them into these bowls, which I've labeled with labels such as ice, rivers, lakes, swamps, groundwater. And it's going to help us compare how much water is in all of the world's rivers, and how much water is in all of the world's ice, how much water is in all of the world's oceans. And I'm going to give you a minute to think about and sort of list, you can do it in your head, you can do it on your paper, the different sources of water on Earth. So for our purposes, we are going to be talking about 2 main types of water. We're going to be talking about fresh water and salt water. So if you listed things like bays, oceans, maybe saltwater marshes, all of those count for us as salt water. And we're going to kind of group it all together just for today and call it ocean water. And the different bowls that I have here represent different sources of fresh water, meaning water that is not salt water. So we're going to start and we're going to measure out the fresh water into these different containers. And then whatever's left in here is going to be all of the world's ocean water or all of the world's salt water. They're not exactly the same thing, but we're going to call them the same thing for today, and then we'll talk more about oceans probably next week or the week after it. So what I have here is a series of measuring utensils, and I'm going to start by measuring out ice. Now ice, if this is 1 liter of water, that's 1,000 milliliters of water, and ice is about 20 milliliters, a little bit over 20. So I'm going to dip in my tablespoon measure, because 1 tablespoon is about 15 milliliters. You know what? I need to stir some of this dirt so you can see it a little better. So we have 15 milliliters, and then I'm going to measure out an additional teaspoon. A teaspoon is 5 milliliters. I'm going to put that in there. All right. And so now we have a bowl that has all of the world's ice in it. It's a little bit hard to see. I'm going to take a picture at the end and put everything side by side. So don't worry if you can't see it right yet. All right, so we have ice. Next up, I'm going to measure out groundwater. So groundwater, I'm going to keep stirring this so it stays nice and dirty. Groundwater represents about 9 milliliters out of our 1,000 milliliters. So I'm going to measure out, in this case, 1/2 of a tablespoon, which is 7.5 milliliters. And I need about 1.5 milliliters left. So I'm going to measure out a 1/4 teaspoon, and I'm actually going to do a tiny bit more. So we now have about, I know it's really hard to see this, I'm sorry for that, we have about 9 milliliters of groundwater. So next up, I'm going to be measuring out the lakes of the world. And believe it or not, the lakes of the world are about 0.08 milliliters. So 1,000 milliliters make up the whole liter. Less than 1 milliliter of that is lake water. And about the closest I can get to that, if I have a teaspoon measured out, where is my teaspoon? I'm just going to dip it in and do a very small amount. We'll call that lakes. All right. Next up, we have swamps. Now, swamps are even less than lakes. Swamps are only about 5 drops. I'm going to keep stirring this so it stays nice and dirty. So I'm actually going to dip my finger in, and I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drops of swamp water. And rivers are less than a single drop. So I'm just going to do the smallest little speck for rivers. Now, if I pick up this liter of very dirty water that used to represent all the water on the world, it's not exactly flat right now. I'm going to try to hold it as flat as I can. But you can see that the line of the water is still just about at 1 liter. And again, it's not exactly flat right now, so it might look like it's a little more or a little bit less, depending on how I hold it. But the water has barely moved, even though I've scooped out pretty much all of the fresh water on Earth. I've scooped out our ice, I've scooped out our groundwater, I've scooped out our lake water, our swamps, and our rivers. And we're still pretty much where we started. That's because 97% of water on Earth is in the oceans. So that leaves just 3% for all the other water on Earth. Some of it, which we can't even access because it's in the ground or it's in ice. And of course, the ice can melt, or we can drill wells into the ground. But the amount of fresh water on the Earth's surface is incredibly small compared to how much water we have on our planet as a whole. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to put everything down, and I'm going to take a picture the best that I can. And I'm hoping that my picture will show you just how much water is in all of these little containers that I poured them into, compared to how much water is left in our oceans. I'm also going to ask you to do a couple of activities around freshwater and ocean water based on the content of this video. So I hope you enjoyed. It might be a little bit hard to see the photo, but I'm going to do my best to make sure that you can see how much water is in the different vessels. All right, I'll see you in just a little bit on our Zoom call, and I hope you all have wonderful days.